members of the public coming in, but why don't we call this meeting to order? Do you want to do the roll call?
Committee Member Arciniega.
Here.
Committee Member Barajas.
Here.
Committee Member Murray.
Here.
Committee Member Ospina.
Here.
Committee Member Pereira.
Here.
Committee Member Solano.
Here.
Co-Chair Brokaw.
Here.
Co-Chair Zucker.
Here. All right. We've got a flag here in this room. Just looking for it. All right. Pledge allegiance to the flag of
the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so see, we've got a lot more members of the public here today, so that's really great. That was our intent of having this this evening meeting. We are going to have public comment on individual items and also a general public comment on the end. So we'll open up for public comment on each of the items that come up, before any kind of decision on anything. But first, if we can take a look at the minutes from the last meeting and see if anybody has any changes.
I move we approve.
Need a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. All right, on to item number 5, discuss Farmworker Resource Program goals and conflict resolution process. I think, did you want to talk a little bit about the goals to kind of get us started off on?
We don't have.
I have the
copies.
distribution of the program goals that we've consistently been handing out at each one of the meetings.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. You can continue the discussion. If you'd like.
Take another one.
And do we have enough copies of these for anybody in the audience?
Thank you.
Distribute. We have a few.
So we talked a little bit about this at the last meeting, but I know if folks have any kind of thoughts. I think we talked a little bit about goals that we may want to really kind of prioritize, or goals that are kind of met through other functions. But if anybody has anything to add on that kind of discussion we started at the last meeting, the goals before we dive into to kind of conflict resolution process and really how this whole thing's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, looking at the goals, I think it would be really useful to focus on two very challenging and basic parts of them. First one is building trust and relationship. On the sheet that we have, it says building trust and relationship with farm workers. Absolutely essential, but the Board of Supervisors resolution actually adds to that employers, advocates, and related agencies. So, building trust and relationships. I think we should talk about how does that happen? Real on the ground. How do you do that? And then the other part, I would think would be really valuable to discuss this evening is the process of resolving issues that farm workers bring to the program. What does that look like? What are the outcomes for the intended outcomes, possible outcomes for the worker and for the employer? How do both parties benefit? That whole piece, how can it happen? Because as I started to think about that, it's not obvious.
Well, so I think I mentioned this last time. I think really the first goal of building trust comes from the second thing that you've talked about. I think trust will happen once the community sees results, once they see problems being resolved, once the employers, the growers see that, you know, there's better relationships with the workers. So I think, I don't know if there's so much thought or discussion we can put into that part. I think it's something that depends on the second part.
I think it's kind of a chicken and an egg, because unless the workers trust the program and the person who's hired, they won't come forward. And unless employers trust the program, they will not open their doors to any kind of work at the work site. So I agree, trust will build on results, but there's got to be some level of trust to even get started.
So maybe part of that, at least from the worker end, is creating a conflict resolution process that will yield results, right? So being able to say this is a program that will have these mechanisms in place that workers will be able to recognize and say, okay, that's useful to us, right? So if there's something in place where workers will feel like they can be heard on issues and they can engage directly with the grower, with supervisors, or where they think there will be some sort of investigation of their claims or review of their claims for validity, something where there's a mechanism in place where they can ID that mechanism and say, okay, well, that will be something that might be useful to us. So maybe that's the way to try to start that trust from the beginning, is by laying out things that workers will be able to know will be useful.
Ellen, I think that if you go back to what we originally intended this program to be, and we look at it from that spirit, you know, this program since its inception has been about trying to create something that we believe doesn't currently exist. And so by that I mean you have avenues by which, you know, some people would say you have many avenues that workers could get help. Some people would say, well, that's nice in theory, but it doesn't really exist the same way you think it exists. From the employer standpoint, saying one thing, and from the worker standpoint, saying another. And you know, what we were trying to create with this is an engagement that, in my mind, is a physical location, but so that would be the hardware, if you were to use that analogy. But the software would be the person or the team that's involved in navigating this and trying to create trust through outreach, both from outreach to employers, but also outreach to the workforce, to the people laboring in the field, to create trust in that this would become a neutral ground where that, you know, where resolution could take place or the help could be gained by one, engaging with public agencies that should be helping these folks and help mentoring them to gain that help, or starting the process with some of the organizations that should be doing the work, but also providing a resource to the employer by saying, look, not every issue needs to result in some government action. We may be able to sit down and resolve these things just by talking them out. And if a worker was to go to cause or go to CRLA, that opens up a channel that you may not be able to come back from. Whereas if you can engage at it in a more neutral, friendly spot, or through a process that's put up in more of an informal way, I think that would be a benefit, a value to both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think what a lot of folks are saying is that trust doesn't come naturally, it won't come instantly, right? And I think we'd like everyone to kind of have an open mind about this program, and for workers to want to participate in it, and for employers to want to participate in it, but we don't expect everyone to just give us kind of the benefit of the doubt, right? And we'll have to kind of prove ourselves that this can work the way that we say it can work. But there are these structural things, right, that can increase that trust, increase the likelihood that people will trust this, and I think it's both structure and function, right? Structure being things like, where is this housed? What is the process for contacting it? What the process part being the kind of, what is the conflict resolution process when something does come up? Who's brought in? How are those conversations handled? Right? And I think that's a lot of what we're here today to discuss. Right?
And I would add to that also, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, you've been waiting.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that the qualifications of the person or persons that are part of this program have
Absolutely.
a lot to do with trust as well.
Absolutely.
I think that Dave said something, very important about engagement. And so because we're kind of talking about different stakeholders in the industry and in the process, I think for me it's helpful to think about what from the labor advocacy side and what from the employer side will encourage those sides to engage. And speaking from the experience that I have from where I work now, I think that a lot of what the workers are encouraged, I don't want to frame it in how they're discouraged, right? I want to say how can we encourage it, or how can we encourage engagement? And so I think that it's when workers feel or have an assurance that by engaging, they're not going to further be discriminated against or retaliated against. I think that's really big. And then I think on the employer side, one of the big ones is, knowing that the process that they're going to engage in is in fact going to be by somebody who's going to be objective and who's going to take into consideration various options rather than just sending them to CRLA or sending them to, a private attorney or something. That there is going to be like a fair shot at this office, and you guys can add to that, who are on both sides in terms of what you feel would encourage engagement. So I just want to say maybe we can think about that, and maybe that's kind of like the guideposts of what this program looks like before we drill down into step 1, step 2 of a conflict resolution. But what are some of the things that should guide the process?
I think you'll find most employers will want to engage. They want to do the right things, and I think to gain the trust from the employer, you will need that unbiased. The person that's assigned to this position would make it a tool for the employer to better his operation, to make things, to make conditions better for their farm workers and whatnot. That is key to develop. For you to have trust amongst the employers, it's key that that they assist in that.
Any other?
Just real quick, if I could map out, what good looks like as we move forward, it would be, I'm going to say a person, because I think that's realistically what we're talking about. A person that is looked at as someone who is going to give everyone a fair shake, and they're an honest broker of trying to come to the best resolution possible for whatever it is that needs to be resolved. And in each case is going to be completely different. Sometimes it's going to be somebody who needs help with a certain agency that has nothing to do with work. Sometimes it will have to do with work, and the program, one way or another, it's going to be voluntary. And so we'll know whether or not it's creating value based on who's utilizing the product that we're talking about inventing here. And so I think it's always important to look at what good would look like as we move forward, and trying to not create something that currently exists, but try to fill a shortfall that I think we all realize to some level it certainly does.
in determining what this person's, his or her responsibilities are going to be, and we need to determine that to determine what qualifications are required for this person. HR, what are we looking, what kind of person are we looking at? Person that's well-versed in regulatory issues, obviously, human resources. This person's going to need to have a lot of qualities such as that. So we need to determine what their responsibilities are going to be, what purpose they're going to serve. So.
So kind of on that note, I followed up on what you asked of me last time, and I brought two job descriptions for community worker positions at CRLA. Both of them are community workers. One of them is LGBT oriented, so obviously that's not the scope of where we're at, but it was just a different kind of job description, so I thought I would include it as well. The language is a little different.
Great.
I agree with what you're saying about the skill sets, and I do think it's important for us to define that responsibility. But before we kind of go there, which I feel like it's easier for all of us to talk about, what is, really, like, are we having the conversation about if we could create this process, this conflict resolution process, that the best trained person's going to come in and, like, just employ it and make it wonderful. But we have to set that direction of what it looks like, don't we? I mean, is that what we are here to do? And then, I don't know, how do you start that discussion? Are we talking about, person walks in the door and they have this complaint, and so
that's the best way to map
what are they
it out.
offering?
Yeah,
If
the
they're
best way to
offering
map
a
it out right there.
referral, Are they offering, I'm going to contact your employer and we're going to utilize this process, or what are they offering? And I know it's going to be, largely driven by what that worker's seeking, because they're going to make the ultimate decision, I believe, into what they want to do. But if they say, I want to do this program that you have here, County of Ventura, what does that look like?
And so for our agenda today, we really put to, kind of a, there's a lot of things to figure out over the course of this process, but one big chunk we can take on today that I think that seems like a really great, to speak to what you're saying, both Jessica and Danny, a chunk that we can really dive into today that I think is helpful, since so many of the folks that we want to hear from are in the room, is the conflict resolution process, and mapping out what does it look like when somebody, calls or says, hey, here's what's going on, right? And what's almost the flow chart of outcomes that can happen with that, right? Depending on, the circumstances in that particular case. So do we want to dive into that?
I think we need
Folks,
to.
you ready?
That would be
I think we need to.
constructive.
Great.
So we want to do that kind of like step by step. So someone comes in
Yeah.
with an issue, farm worker comes in with an issue.
What's protocol?
I mean,
Yeah.
my thought initially is there's kind of three types of, someone's going to come in and they might have three things they want, right? One might be, this is going on my farm, but I am too intimidated to kind of file a formal complaint. I just want to kind of give an anonymous tip and say, hey, this is going on. I don't want to be involved. I want my name and my face nowhere near this, right? But I just want to let you know we don't always have clean water, or there's pesticides sometimes being applied while workers are working, or whatever it may be, right? And then kind of figuring out what happens there. I think another one is, I totally know I want to go the legal route, and I want to file a formal complaint, and I want to exercise my rights. I just don't know what my rights are. I don't know how to navigate the system. Can you help me with that, right? Can you help me file paperwork or whatever it is that I need to do? And then I think a third, which I think that we're hoping will be a large portion of what could happen, because I think this can lead to a lot of good outcomes, right? Is I just want this fixed, right? There's the discrepancy in my paycheck. I wasn't paid what I thought I should be paid, or here's this safety thing, and I'm not trying to get my employer, or I'm not, but I just want the problem fixed, right? And if there's kind of an informal resolution process or mediation process, then that's that's good for me, right? it seems to me like those are the three kind of main people who are going to walk in the door or make a phone call. Does that jive with other people's thoughts, or?
I don't know about the helping file paperwork. I think when it gets to that point, you need to direct them to the regulatory agencies that are already in place to handle that for them. I don't think this person would need to be able to go into that. I think initially conflict resolution, maybe an issue is brought to their attention. Maybe they want to go discuss it with them, discuss it with the employer, and try to resolve it that way. And if it goes to the next step, direct them to a regulatory agency at that point. We already have agencies in place to handle those situations, correct? So
I think what we heard at the big meeting that Supervisors Bennett and Foy held with all the agencies up on the stage, that there are certainly agencies in place to provide all the different kinds of help, but knowing how to get to them, to navigate, is very difficult.
Yeah.
So I think there is a role, if that is clearly the obvious thing to do. I don't think that it would, even if somebody comes in and says, I want the government to help me, I don't know that that would be the first thing that the, what are we calling this person? A staff?
that's
The magician.
The Farmworker Resource Program is getting it right.
The magician, the magician. I don't know. That would be the first thing he or she would do. Might discuss whether there would be a way to address it at the workplace. That would only happen when it's really egregious, really bad.
a labor relations consultant.
So, I mean, like almost any kind of service or agency, you can kind of go, here are your options, right?
Yeah.
You know, and here are the pros and cons of each option.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. The first step is to advise the person that comes in what their options are.
Right.
Right? So, if you look at this from a decision tree, there are several options. I agree that those are the type of, people that could walk in. Those are the general type of problems that could walk through the door without being specific. But then there's a set of options that can take place that person could be advised of.
So, I think, Jessica, you said at a high level, assisting in creating a better work environment, and I think that's really the essence of what we would be trying to do, right? Creating a better work environment, working with the employee and the employer. And then the other thing is trying to facilitate a resolution if possible before they have to go to an agency. That way you're adding to something that doesn't exist right now. So for example, in that case, I would ask, does the employer know about it, right? Is maybe the employer does know and they haven't done anything about it, or maybe they don't even know, and this person can help facilitate that conversation or that awareness so that the employer does have the opportunity to fix it.
Right.
If it can't be fixed, then it goes through the next step about being maybe referred to the appropriate agency, helping the employee walk through the process and accompanying them through the process.
That sounds appropriate to me.
Great.
Yeah, it sounds good, but how many time we need to get to the employer to resolve the issue? Because if we waiting for them to resolve the issue and we don't give them like in 5 days or in 7 days, we need to hear something, a resolution from you. If you don't resolve this, we're going to the second step. Yeah.
And I think part of that is something we brought up. I think part of that really does need to be permission to go and do some type of review. Maybe not like an official inspection, right, because they're not fact gathering for the purpose of filing anything, because that's not the point, but to ensure compliance, because the reality is we just can't just call up and take that person's word for it.
But couldn't the employee also say, yes, it did change, or no, it didn't change?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
That's an option.
follow up with the employee.
But I agree,
have a-
follow
yeah.
up and making sure that it did get resolved.
You could have a whatever it is in 10 days you call back that employee and say, hey, you know, how are things now? Did it get fixed or not? Right?
But I
There's a circle back point.
And I think if the employee says, no, it hasn't,
Right.
then there has to be something else to require movement, right?
That escalation.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. It's an escalation that hopefully starts low, right? And we don't, you know, shoot up to here initially, but there is something so that the small number of true bad actors really are going to have, you know, there's some carrot, but there's also some stick, right?
Well, I think that, you know, as we're talking about when workers come in, how we lay out what the options are, it's the same when that person contacts the employer. Because if we, you know, we can't assume that every employer is going to know what the program is or that's going to want to voluntarily participate based on a lot of number of circumstances. And so I think that, you know, we have to think on the other hand too, those options that we provide the employer in regards to, you know, this is this program, you can voluntarily participate in it to resolve this issue that's been brought to our attention. But take into consideration, when do you disclose the name of the worker, you know, whether, I mean, and then they think, okay, well, you know, we're reaching out, give you 2-3 days to let us know, and then if not, you know, then we're going to advise the worker that you don't want to voluntarily come to the table and list and try and resolve this, or you know, I'm not saying that it's because they're not wanting to, but for whatever number of reasons, they're not choosing this route, and then let the worker know and let the employer know, okay, then these are the next steps that we're going to refer them to wherever they need to go.
That's a great example, and I would think that the person that we want in that role would need to be able to determine, okay, do I disclose a name, do I not? Like, I can think if it's maybe, let's say, a safety issue in the ranch that doesn't only apply to that one person, then you don't need to say the name, right? If it's maybe a sexual harassment where you're actually trying to determine, okay, do we need to go further, then, you know, I guess at that point you have to make a decision whether, okay, do we disclose the name or do we not? Is it necessary? Or, you know, we would always want to protect the employee. But I would imagine if it's an issue that affects the whole ranch, then, you know.
And then, you know, I mean, if we're thinking along the lines of something different that doesn't exist, then how feasible is it that the actual manager, you know, high-level manager is coming to the table with the worker and with the county resource person and not referring this to their council, right? So what does that look like? Because I think that in my, I can imagine that may be something different than what normally exists for all of the reasons we're aware of, running your businesses and referring these matters to others to take care of them. But in regards to building trust and creating something new, how is that influenced by actually having somebody like a labor relations person that's in the field, that's on the ground, that can make these decisions and listen more than anything to try and improve those working conditions. Not that a council is not going to listen, but they're there with definitely a different objective, right?
Yeah.
So offering that when you make that call too, like, are you willing to personally participate, or who are you willing to designate that would come and would have this conversation with this group, or address this issue if it's an anonymous issue, that you would actually go out and look at the condition that's being complained of, and then work back, I guess, with the county person at that point if it's an anonymous one.
So maybe could we zoom in on if they do want a kind of direct resolution / mediation type thing, what that looks like? Because I agree that little things like who shows up to that meeting are really important, right? Is it kind of, you know, a top level person from the company? Is it a kind of lower level manager, supervisor? Is it, you know, somebody with a lawyer, right? You know, who's in the room, and it can make a big difference of what the trust is in the room, what the environment is. You know, I sometimes say, like, a lawyer is like a gun, right? Like, you know, you walk into a room with your lawyer, and it's like walking into a room with a gun. You know, it might give you a power step up, but it definitely doesn't help the trust in the room, right? So, you know, what's the right conditions for a successful mediation or a successful resolution if the worker does want to kind of go that route?
Wouldn't it depend on the issue, though?
Yes, that's true.
I think it depends on the issue and the employer and the person that is waging the complaint, right? So every situation is going to be a little bit different depending on who the players are that are part of the situation. It's, you know, there's several different options that you could put forth, right? One would be an attorney, one would be an informal, you know, the ownership of the company or the top level leadership or their HR person. It's just going to depend on what the issue is and what the mentality is walking in, right?
In a large company, to whom do you think this communication would be made? Would it be the HR
Most definitely.
director first?
I think so.
So
I think there's always an issue of, in a small company, I don't think it's much of an issue because there's not the layers of management. But in a big company, there's going to be an issue of getting it down to the level of the direct supervisor. And if you are going to be assuring the worker that they're not going to be retaliated against or discriminated against, you've got to get down to that level of the direct supervisor. I mean, you can get all the assurances in the world from the owner and the HR director.
Right.
But
A lot of larger companies, as you know, will utilize their HR personnel for conflict resolution. I know that's our company, our HR people. I mean, our entire staff it's open door. They call her whenever she wants. If there's an issue, they give her a call and she handles it, you know, internally. So that's how we operate. So it would be something comparable to that, you know. So we try to, you know, like most of them, you know, we engage in safety meetings and whatnot. I try to encourage my guys to talk to HR if they have an issue, to discuss it with them and let them know so we can better ourselves. And that's, you know, it's got to be that same process. I think you know, so.
And everyone has, you know, if the issue isn't resolved through this format, I mean, I agree with you. In a perfect world, every organization, every company would have exactly what you explained, right? And a lot of us do, but a lot of us don't. And so I think this, in a way, is trying to shore up that gap for the organizations that don't have what you suggest in exactly the same way. Meaning, when somebody walks into your HR department and wants to talk about something, if that's not resolved, you know, certainly they can visit CRLA, they can go talk to Roman at the UFW, they can do any number of things, and it doesn't stop with that conversation. But you're hopeful that you're able to resolve it internally prior to it getting to that point.
Absolutely.
So
So
then
it
what about?
sounds
Okay.
like that first step is that person that calls or comes in, and then the county employee, you know, I would put out there that it's like a listening portion, right? So they listen to what that issue is, and they discuss the options. And then if the employee directs, you know, they'd like to engage or try and engage through this conflict resolution, then there's the outreach to the employer. And then the employee needs to then explain to the employer what they're offering in terms of the county's resource program. And then if that employer makes that decision, then it's another listening on that end to listen to what the employer, you know, knows or doesn't know about this, I guess. I mean, what does that look like? Because if they're not aware of it at all, then are we asking them to come in to learn about it, or are we asking to transmit what the employee has said to that employer? I mean, what's the first, you know, kind of step?
I think it would also be the options, right? Because these are the options.
Right.
We can talk about it and we can help mediate, if that's the word. But I think also depends on the severity. For example, if it's something that can be fixed quickly, then I would assume the employer would say, I'll get it fixed, no problem. Maybe it's the bathroom or could be something that can be fixed. If it requires more understanding about what the issue is, then, offering the employer the chance to come and meet and learn about what the issue is and then what are the options.
Yeah, that's right. It seems like there's kind of there's that diverging path after you then contact the employer, right? It's either the employer goes, oh, no problem, done, fixed, right? And then like we said, you have that in a few days you circle back with that worker and say, hey, did this really get fixed, right? And make sure. But that can be as easy as that, and there's no need for kind of a mediation process or something like that. The other option is, well, I'm not sure, let's talk about it, and then there's kind of the need to sit down with, maybe it's the employer and the HR person, or the employer and the HR person and the supervisor, or what's appropriate. And do we want to prescribe that who we want to be part of that mediation, or do we want to say, this is kind of up to the company, whatever makes sense within your company's structure?
Because it has to be somebody that can make decisions and that understands what the different roles in the company are and how it can be fixed.
I think in addition to that, I definitely agree with that, but I think it also needs to involve someone who does have knowledge of what's going on, which is usually the direct supervisor or foreman, right? Because if it is just the HR person or a management type person, they're going to hear, but they're not going to be, they're going to say, well, I'll have to check with the supervisor, right? So if the supervisor can come along with that person, you have the power, the authority, but also that direct avenue to have that conversation at that time, instead of the kind of back and forth, and you also call your attorney to check, the whole idea is maybe to open up these conversations so they happen a little more transparently on both ends, right? They can hear directly from what the worker wants, what they're looking for, and then the worker can hear a response right away about, and maybe that can help resolve things rather than, a delayed back and forth.
But also we have to understand that some workers may not want to be in the meeting.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, that's an option. If assuming both sides are open to that, right? Definitely there will be workers who will say, I don't want to be named or confront, but there will be workers that, because maybe it's not a complaint, maybe it's a suggestion, right? And it's not, the bathrooms are dirty, but maybe it's, I want to try starting this program at work, or I want to start this thing, or different suggestions that are more proactive rather than criticism.
This also gets into some of the things that we've talked about that, workers may complain about that might not actually be illegal, but, an employer, if raised to their attention, might say, oh, that's actually a legitimate, issue, and maybe we should work together on solving that, right? My supervisor yells at me, right? And that's something that, there's no law against supervisors yelling at people, right? But their boss might not think that's the best way to run the company, and so that mediation could bring some added value to both the worker and the company if that conversation is had, right? And so how would those kinds of mediations work if it's more of an informal thing that's not really necessarily a legal issue?
Before all those steps, I would like to know if there's a way, how can we invite companies, growers, to be part of this program? Because if we have knowledge that some growers wanted to be part of this program, we're going to have ways how to negotiate with them. There's some program in Florida called a Fair Food program that worked in this way that I saying right now. There's a voluntary contract with the growers that wanted to be part of this program or that program in this case. When something happened in the company, someone from the programs goes to the field and investigate what is the issue, and also there's a training for workers to train their co-workers about their rights, and I would like to see something like that here in the county, because we're talking all the state what we want to do, but we need to try to get some companies like here we have four of you, and something what I like to see too is like if you see this person going to your company, going to your area, and talking about this program, because we had a lot of agencies, but no agency is going to fields to talk to the worker. We are here. If you have some issue, come here. That's not happening right now, and I think this is gonna be something different what we looking for.
That's absolutely right. And I think we definitely need to talk about what's the proactive outreach and education that happens, right? Because we know we don't want somebody just sitting in an office all day waiting for the phone to ring, right?
Yeah.
We want somebody who's actually getting out there in the field, getting out there in the community, talking to real human beings, right?
To me, what that might look like, just real quick to even go back further ahead of the process than what we're talking about here. I mean, assumingly we're going to define all of this, and then we're going to conduct a series of interviews, and then we're going to select somebody. And then the first thing that person, in my mind, needs to do is learn. In other words, in the room now we have, many, many hundreds of years probably of experience that person could, gain by listening to trade associations, to our employer trade associations, to the labor advocacy groups, to the county agencies that exist now, and get some spatial awareness of what actually is going on in terms of the perception in the community. Once you do that, then you form a series of outreach events, right? Working with the trade associations, working with employers, working with advocacy groups, county agencies, and so that you move into that phase. And then it becomes a series of you use that to create a network, right? To your point about having employers that, what I would like to see and what I would do if this person were to be seated, I would say, here's my phone number. If you hear of anything that's happening in my business, please call me because I'd like to know about it. That's what you hope for, right? And that person knows a contact within each organization operating in the county that they can reach out to create dialogue. And then you move into this process, right? So a lot of the heavy lifting is done prior to even getting to this point, in my mind.
That's right.
That's kind of what I was getting at, that building trust,
Yeah.
which is starting listening and also communicating what the point of all this is,
Right.
and building relationships. Yeah.
It's like when, at Cause, we hire a new community organizer, the first thing we do is give them a massive list of people to just sit down with, right? and talk to and start building that relationship and listen to them. What are the issues in the community, right? It's kind of the same concept here. The first thing this person's going to do is, meet with probably all the people in this room, right? And start listening. And I would love to hear when we get to public comment from folks in the room, what type of outreach you think would be most effective, right? To reach out to the farm worker community or to reach out to the employer grower community, right? What is a program that's just starting need to do to make sure it gets the word out there, make sure people understand what it's about, how it works, and what's actually going to work. Right?
So I think it would be really useful if we could develop the ideal protocol. This is this is where we're trying to get to, the outcome we want from the company's point of view. These are the ways we think the company can make that happen. And it will be up to each company, but to have that ideal. And the same for the worker, because ideally the worker will be willing to put him or herself out there and talk directly. I mean, that's really ideal. And so we could define the best practices in this conflict resolution. And then, it won't always work that way, but people will know what we are hoping will happen and why on paper.
So maybe a tricky one. I think that we talked a little bit about what's the path you go down if there's more of an informal resolution or mediation process, right? I think one of the trickiest ones is if a worker says, hey, this is something that's going on, my company, I don't want to be associated with it, I don't want my name or face out there, but here's a thing, do with it what you think is best, but I'm too scared to, right? And so what space is there to still make improvements in working conditions or address that issue without a worker willing to, go further than kind of an anonymous tip or complaint? Does the person then, kind of drive out to that farm that worker said, oh, there's not adequate waters, or the water or the bathrooms are messed up or whatever, right? Do they go out there? Are they allowed to kind of go on the farm and check things out? Do they ask the employer, hey, can you meet me at your farm? What's kind of the protocol?
Well, ideally, in this program, the barrier of fear of retaliation and discrimination, which means you don't want to put yourself out there and your name out there. You want things to change, but you don't dare be the complainer. Ideally, that's back to the trust again. Well, maybe I need to put this as a question. Would there ever be a way that this magician could actually say to a worker, don't worry, you won't be retaliated against, and you won't be discriminated against? Could that ever happen? Because that would be ideal.
I mean, there's the worker advocates and agency folks around the table. You all deal with this every day, right? Jessica, Juvenal, Natalia, right? You have workers that come to your organizations and agencies and say, I don't want to, I don't want my name out there, and you do try to talk to them, and so
it's going to be kind of difficult because this person's not going to have enforcement authority. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you can go out and say, oh, I've seen. What are you going to do? I mean, it's got to. This person's got to be focused in conflict resolution. There's some things that are going to be reported potentially that he will not be able to resolve. I mean, sexual harassment or anything like that, he's going to have to direct them to the proper agency to handle it. But with no enforcement authority, how are they going to be able to go out and inspections and all that? You know what I mean? I guess I don't know how we'd have to figure that one out.
I think it's going to be, even a sexual harassment one, I think it's going to really matter about the parties involved.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because if you have an employer representative who is willing to sit down and listen to somebody, and the worker is trust enough that they're not going to be retaliated against and they're willing to talk, there could be a resolution out of that doesn't end up at an enforcement agency.
Okay,
I think so, right?
Okay.
But I think our job is to kind of put out, when you're talking about the retaliation thing, what I do now is just provide people information about what the law states. So it's against the law to be retaliated against, right? That's my job. But this is not the same. This is something that we're trying to create that's different. So I don't know, I'm just thinking, right, out of my work head of the law, because we all know it's against the law to retaliate against a worker for bringing up a workplace condition. But what if there was something where, first of all, I think conflict resolution in a lot of settings is based off of listening. So I think that we have to encourage some type of a sit-down face-to-face, because I don't think that I think it's the best opportunity to try and achieve a mutual benefit and improve the working conditions, as Dave was talking about. And then what if there was so either that's done face-to-face, where that person who comes to the company says, for you coming and talking to us and us working on this, you are not going to be retaliated against. I don't know. What impact would that have on the workers and the way they feel about expressing their concern? Or the county, we develop some type of I don't want to say rules, but best practices or guideposts that in there says, the employer participating in this program commits to not retaliate against you for participating in the program. But I don't know. I mean,
that's what I was thinking.
Signing your name means something sometimes. Sometimes and the worker on the other end committing to telling the truth, to, to participate in this process, right? Not for any other means, but to reach a resolution that would mutually benefit the parties. So I just put that out there as ideas to try and address these things that currently exist, and then how do we aim at least to try and make it something that improves, right? Because like the bathroom issue, so there's always controversy about how clean, how often, in the morning they weren't clean, but now they are, and so you call the employer when they're not clean, and then they're clean. But what about the one where workers say there's not enough bathrooms? And the growers meeting the obligation to provide the minimum amount of bathrooms. What do you do there? Like, is there a chance to have a face-to-face to talk about, and it's obviously, again, the right parties that are willing to engage, to say, not just say, no, I have the right number that I'm supposed to have, right? But are you willing to have a conversation about why this is an issue for workers, that there should be more bathrooms? And not cleanliness, but so it's not a legal question, right? But it's like, can we mutually resolve this?
I think that face-to-face is ideal, but I do think that there will still be some employees who don't want to say who they are, and it happens everywhere, at all levels, at all companies. I think that, but even if it's anonymous, there should be an opportunity for improvement if there's an issue there.
So say I'm a person who is getting a worker, I'm with the program, I'm staff, right? The worker comes and they says, here's this issue, right? Maybe it's a bathroom issue, maybe it's a sexual assault issue. I try to convince them as much as I can. Hey, face to face is the way to go. Like, we can really resolve this. We before we enter into any mediation, we do a working agreement that says the employer's not going to retaliate against you, and they still say no. I just don't want to take the risk, right? Then what's my next step as a staff member for the Farmworker Resource Program? Do I call up the employer and say, hey, got an anonymous tip that this guy Joe Surquero, right, is like, he's a sexual harasser, and I don't know whether that's true or not, but this came to our office, and kind of do you want to talk about it, right? Or what's kind of the next step there, right?
I think that can be done, and it works the same as an anonymous hotline. I think many employers have that, or some employers have that. So you're not going to know who called, but you're going to know that perhaps there's an issue with the supervisor. So if the employer knows, and whether it's through their HR department or themselves trying to, find out through talking to different employees, is this an issue? Have you experienced anything, and just trying to find out if there's in fact an issue with the supervisor and how it can be addressed. But I think even if it's anonymous, you can have, as long as you have enough information about who the supervisor is, and you can try to find out if there's an issue.
So many times we find these issues to be, for those of us that have been involved in this type of thing, which I would include all of us sitting here, it's always in the gray area, right? And whenever you sit down, it's, many times you run into issues where it's a little bit of everyone's fault in these in the process, right? This is a farm worker resource program, which is geared towards helping people that assumingly have fewer avenues for help than those on the other side of the discussion. But the reality is that it's a two-way street a lot of times, right? And so you'll run into issues where I agree with you're talking about a bathroom, but even a bathroom, it can be what is your definition of clean? What is my definition of clean? Now, the number of bathrooms, to your point, Jessica, if it's a quantity that's legal, not a whole lot you can do except call that employer and say, I'm picking up some static about this. You probably should know, given the fact that it's more difficult every day to get workers to choose which location they're going to work.
Right.
And so you may want to know that as an employer to have conditions that people are happy with, right? Because they may choose to go work somewhere else. So, that's also a carrot that can be used to try to help, give feedback in someone who might be wondering why they're not able to get enough people to come work for their business, right? Again, I don't think it's not very difficult to make a rule, but those are the different types of things that could happen. Sometimes it's a little bit of the person that's coming in to complain. They may need to have part of their learning may be to understand what they may be doing wrong in handling a certain situation, right? Which could also help the employer. And we may not find that, this program won't change the fact that they could choose to go to CRLA, they could choose to go to UFW, they could choose to go to the district attorney's office. This would be I think the most desired outcome if we do this right. And by creating the value, I think restricts someone's willingness to go about and do it in that way.
Lucas,
I was just-
we're half, go ahead.
Thinking on that example of the bathrooms, maybe the potential resolution is the location of the bathrooms, right? And not necessarily adding more bathrooms, but you need to understand what the issue is first
And there needs to be that conversation, maybe.
Exactly, like be willing to understand, okay, what is the issue? Let me see how, what we might be able to do, and maybe how to do with the location of the bathroom.
And maybe there's ways to restructure breaks or something, right? And there's all kinds of ways you could deal with that, and actually having that conversation helps to get there, right?
We're 1 hour into our meeting. We have a lot of people here that we'd like to have a chance to talk. I think this evening is not about reaching decisions, but getting all this stuff out. So should we stop now and listen and ask for input on this part
That sounds
of
great to
the
me.
discussion?
Is that okay with everyone? Can go to public comment now?
And then come back to the location issue, which is our other agenda.
Perfect.
I agree.
All right. Are we doing comment cards, or we haven't had as many people in the past, so.
We don't have comment cards, but what we can do, there's a variety. You can maybe go from around the room, or we can have people start lining up like by the microphone.
Can we take the mic to people?
The mic could be passed around. The only thing I would say is it could cause feedback. So that's why we want to kind of keep it in one location, just at one at a time, because that way it doesn't start ringing loud in our ears.
I think so.
Yeah. Oh, and then also we need to know the speaker time.
Yeah. So maybe can we get a sense of how many people are interested in speaking tonight?
Está preguntando quiénes están interesados en platicar, en exponer un problema. Levanten la mano, por favor.
Okay. So looks like maybe around 10 people.
10 or 12.
What do you think?
We give two minutes, 20 minutes, 3 minutes, a quarter minute.
Can we spare 30 minutes to give 3 minutes a person? I mean, I think most people won't take the whole 3 minutes. But if we allow 3 minutes a person, is that all right? Great. Yep.
Who's our timekeeper? You
Are
are.
you wanting to talk
Jessica.
about what you guys will be discussing or anything else?
Yeah, maybe we can have some guidance from that. I mean, my thought is, it would be really helpful, in terms of what we're discussing. Well, there will be time for general public comment at the end, right? So if so you want to discuss anything, general public comment at the end, but in terms of this agenda item, the conflict resolution process, I think is really helpful, right? What would you like to see in terms of, if you're a farm worker or an employer, what would you like to see in the process of what happens when there's a problem and you come to this program? So why don't we just have folks start lining up there behind the microphone there, and then we'll have 3 minutes per person.
Who's first?
Buenas noches. Yo quería leerles estos 5 puntos que queremos que tomen en cuenta.
I'd like to read these 5 points that I'd like you to take into account.
Y el número 1 es incluir
Number 1
en sus prioridades
is including your priorities.
entrenamientos para prevenir el acoso
Training
sexual,
to prevent
reforzar la ley
sexual
SB
harassment,
1087
make the SB 1087 law
para la
take
mujer
effect
campesina.
for the female farm workers.
Número 2,
Number 2,
¿qué va a ser diferente este programa a los demás?
how is this program going to be
Ejemplos.
different to others? Please tell us, give us examples.
Número 3, las represalias,
Number
cómo
3,
van a trabajar con la comunidad
How
para
are we going
que
to
ellos
work with the
tengan
community so
confianza
they are not retaliated against and
para reportar los abusos.
they can trust that they can report these abuses.
Número 4,
Number 4,
cómo trabajar con el
How to work
DFEH
DFEH
y
and
EEOC
EEOC
para mejorar los servicios a nivel local, para
at the local
reportar
level.
la mayoría de los cargos.
to report the majority of the charges.
Número 5,
Number 5,
horarios accesibles para los campesinos
accessible
para que
schedule
participen en estas
for the
reuniones.
farm workers so they can participate in these meetings.
Gracias por su atención y
Thank you for
consideración.
attention and consideration.
Buenas noches. Creo que
Good evening.
buenas noches. Creo que a los conflictos hay que buscar, se tratan de buscarle soluciones.
We try to resolve or look for solutions to conflicts,
Y la confianza es lo primero que se tiene que tomar.
and trust is the first issue.
Creo que no habrá miedo si llega un comité a hablar de cualquier problema
I don't think there'd be a problem
con los dueños o la
if
compañía,
a committee goes to speak with the employers or the company.
porque no se trata de quién tiene más fuerza,
Because it's not about who has more power,
porque como campesinos necesitamos el trabajo
because as farm workers, we need the work.
y las compañías también necesitan sacar su producto.
And the company also has to have their product or get their product.
Entonces, pues, si hay conversaciones
So if there's conversations
donde lleven información a los trabajadores al campo,
where you take information to the farm workers at the farms,
cualquier situación que sea, el trabajador del campo va a tener que ir va a tener seguridad en sí mismo si está informado de las leyes.
the farm worker is going to be informed about the laws.
Y así va a haber pues, resoluciones a cada
And
situación.
that way we will have resolutions to every situation.
Y pues de ambas partes,
And from both sides,
si ambas partes están de acuerdo en sacar una solución,
if both sides agree to resolve something,
sí la va a haber, pero si hay educación sobre leyes,
there would be a resolution. So if there's education about laws,
buenas noches.
that would, thank you.
Good evening, Rob Roy. Bienvenidos a todos. I've been representing farmers for almost 42 years. 40 years last week at the Ventura County Ag Association. And I have to say, I agree with most of what I heard here this evening. I'm already doing that. I have been doing it for many years. I have a lot of relationships with representatives from CRLA and the UFW and Jessica. And what you described here is what I do every single day. I get complaints from parties. I've had a cooperative program with CRLA going back to 1992. that if they find a violation of a field sanitation issue, they observe something, call me. In 5 minutes, I'll have it resolved. So, yeah, I think the key to this program is really, first of all, having trust. Because sometimes you deal with some shady people, sometimes you're dealing with people that make complaints that don't have all the facts, or they misunderstand the law, and you need somebody in that position that knows what they're doing. They know labor relations, they know the laws, they know how the government functions, they know the various government agencies where they need to go to. The idea of bringing someone, the foreman in and someone from the company, that's great. It should be a voluntary program. You know, we deal with sexual harassment complaints all the time. We assure workers they're not going to be retaliated against. We fire foremen most of the time when we get these complaints. That's pretty standard. There are an abundance of retaliation laws out there that workers are not even aware of. More have been recently signed by the governor. I think that if we keep this voluntary, if we don't go too far down the road, first of all, I think it has to be a place where a worker can go and make a complaint, whether it's anonymous or not. They can express their viewpoint. They can indicate whether they feel they want to keep it anonymous or not. I think this individual should contact the employer, let them be aware of what the facts are. If they want to come in and talk about it, that's great. If they can get an informal resolution, I think that's wonderful. Because I'll tell you, 95% of the complaints in this county come across my desk every day. And so that would make my job a lot easier. I think you're moving in the right direction. You know, if you want to educate workers in the future, I suggest not going out to farms and do it, because I think most farmers are going to reject that. They rejected that with the ALRB trying to do a similar regulation. But if you want to do, you know, public type of sessions, I know CRLA has done those, I know the Ag Commissioner's done that, and that would be a good way to get the word out to many of these people in the community. So I know my time's limited, so thank you.
Good night, everyone. My name is Mayra Ramirez. I just want to thank you for doing this for the farm workers. The thing that I want to share with you is that today I'm representing farm workers, and what I see is that it's probably not a program that I can trust, because it seems like I want to see something that can be a benefit for the farm worker. And what I see is that I don't that can not only can be a benefit for the grower, and for that, for me, if I have a complaint, and if I don't have the trust to go with my employer, it's because something wrong is happening. And if I'm going to somewhere else, it's because I'm looking for help, and they're not taking me back to my employer. So I want a program that I can really trust, that is gonna help me solve my issues, and it's gonna making sure that it's gonna be neutral. I think that this program should have requirement for growers, and the way I see it, that I hear about the restrooms, about, let's say, about shades. I think that's very basic, that companies should be in compliance with that. And I think companies should have a non-conformities and complaint process. That means that if your employee is coming to say, I don't have a restroom, then that's something that's really bad, because those are basic things. So I think that those should be basic requirements for the growers, where at least the farm workers should know about the process. If something is wrong, where I need to go. If it doesn't get fixed, where am I going? And if I go to this place, is this gonna be really helping me, or is it gonna be like someone mentioned about retaliation. What is going to happen? Can my crew leader tell to some other crew leader from some other company that I give a complaint, and then I'm not going to be able to find a job because I'm the just like causing issues. I think that this program should be a guide to really someone also about the restroom, the distance and the time. There's a specific distance and the time that they need to walk toward to the location where the restrooms are. So there might be that the restrooms for them they seem to be so far, but they're still in compliance with a 5 minutes walk. So I should go to this program and they come and tell me, okay, tell me how long do you have to walk? It's okay, I really walk like a minute, then it's in compliance. Something that I just for the follow up, take in consideration the language. We have a lot of Mixteco community, and also provide a warranty that this program is also really gonna help, or what is and just a follow up. Who's gonna make sure that the correction or the corrective action is really gonna solve the issue? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Araceli Preciado, and I am a community organizer with CAUSE. I work with Lucas. And Lucas is right about the, when as a new organizer, you come in and here's a list of names and stuff, go talk to them, do outreach, get notes, get stuff, and get out. So on the part of outreach, you definitely have to have that connection with the community, right? And being out there where they hang out or like attend events and all that stuff, if you have to go to them. And because I say this because a lot of the agencies that we work out here, and then they say white people don't come, but it's a lot of the times I see those agencies how they work. It's like they don't go out to the people, and I guess as community organizers we do. We meet where they are, and that's something that has to be critical about this person. Hearing you guys about the whole process and everything. And then talking to Jorge over there, it sounds, it seems like you guys are, having good conversations going on right. But my only concern is hearing the retaliation part. And I'm pretty sure a lot of those people are really not going to want to give their name because Mayra pointed out, you're still going to bring it back to the employer. And if they didn't reach that first time to the employer, or they did, and they didn't do anything, and you guys are going to take them back to the employer to talk about the issue. So that's where I'm like a little, kind of questionable how are we going to manage that? Because there is that retaliation piece. They're going to give their names, and you're going to put them face to face to talk to the employers. And so when they go back to work, it's not going to be the same because of the work environment. And I say this because from the community members that I work with, that I know that are farm workers. I've heard someone who, because they said something, next thing they were fired. So that's where I have a little concern, and I agree kind of with Mayra, going back to the employer, if you already went or for one reason you're not going because the environment in there, a lot of them say, like I've heard, they have preference. They're good buddies over here, so they give them special attention to some employees. So if you're not one of them and you're gonna go and complain, you're gonna lose your job. So maybe you're not gonna, if you say, well, let's go talk to your employer and see if we can fix it, they know they're not gonna want to do that. Then probably they're just gonna say, okay, let's not do nothing. Let's not follow up. So that's kind of my concern right now, here in this conversation. That's just my concern that I'm coming because of what I've heard within the community that I work with.
Oh, okay. That's gonna be good. Good evening.
My name is Elizabeth Cordero, and usually they see me through, Líderes Campesinas organization. But today I have the representation in Alianza Nacional de Campesinas, Farm Workers Women nationwide organization. And this organization is sending to you, to all of you, this letter. And the inspiration is coming from 700 farm workers nationwide. And I really don't know if someone saw the protest in Hollywood in November 12th. Yes, we was there. And the reason is because we know, farm workers is not working. They don't work under bright lights or big screens. We work in shadows of society, in insulated fields, in packing houses, out of sight and out of mind of most people in this country. Your job feeds souls, fills hearts, and spreads joy. Our job nourishes the nation with the fruit and vegetables and in other crops that we plant, pick, and pack. It's very important this, and we are happy in Alianza Nacional Campesina that this is a time of change. Everybody say, yes, it's right. We was listening. I understand. I was helping. No, for everybody, it's time to change, to respect women and men. Because we know, we are, as a woman, I understand men are suffering the same kind of violence. My promise today is to teach, study my family, my friends, how we need to respect each another and respect most than nothing farm workers in this country. Thank you.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Jorge.
My name is Jorge.
Hablando específicamente de este programa para los trabajadores del campo,
Talking specifically about this program for farm workers,
ocupamos que esté una oficina en el centro de Oxnard,
an office in the center of Oxnard.
porque mucha gente, el 70% o 75% de los trabajadores del campo
70% of the farm workers
son indígenas, que hablan en mixteco, zapoteco y otras lenguas indígenas.
Mixteco and Zapotec and other native tongues.
Ellos se les dificulta mucho el buscar direcciones
Difficult for them to find directions
porque ellos están, ya saben dónde, como un ejemplo, de la placita,
because they know, for example,
saben dónde está, donde van a ir a pedir el medical, entonces
they know where to go to
así
medical.
se guía a la gente, pues, que no habla o no lee español o inglés.
People guide themselves when they don't know English or how to read.
Por eso es que queremos que esté en un lugar, la oficina que esté en un lugar donde la gente pueda ir y hacer su queja libremente sin que haya represalias.
This is why we want the office to be in a place where people can go to freely to lodge their complaints.
Tuvimos que llegar a esta instancia porque labor de comisiones está hasta Santa Bárbara.
To this instance, because the Labor Commission is in Santa Barbara.
La ley laboral llegó desde 2012 aquí en Oxnard. Ni siquiera había una oficina aquí en Oxnard.
In 2012, and there wasn't even an office here.
Yo me pregunto, si son agencias federales o gubernamentales, ¿por qué no hacen por informar a la gente que está realmente trabajando en el campo, que realmente lo necesita?
So I asked myself, if these are federal agencies, government agencies, why don't they make an effort to make an outreach to the communities to inform them about these?
Así de que este programa está perfecto, pero también tenemos que trabajar más. Los indocumentados como nosotros No venimos a quitar el trabajo a los demás, venimos a hacer grande este país. California está en el lugar 6º o 7º a nivel mundial en economía. Y lo que hacemos posible esto son los rancheros y los campesinos. Gracias.
So we are trying to make this. We don't come here to take away anybody's work. Those of us that are undocumented, we are here to work hard. California is the number 6 or number 7 economy in the world, and we're trying to make all this better.
Hi, my name is Raul Lopez, auxiliary organizer for Cause and product of a family full of field workers. So I just actually was going to touch on Araceli's point about a lot of people being afraid of retaliation and stuff like that. I just wanted to note that it's a special opportunity for this kind of office to possibly start gathering information like that. You know, what kind of, you can actually start keeping a database of what kind of things that have been reported. Is there and then you can find patterns, or you can find information out of that data that is accumulated month after month, year after year. Hopefully leading to better practices as they go on, because this is not just as simple as people misunderstanding law. It is not that, just FYI. It's, and if you think that all it is farm workers misunderstanding law, then you misunderstand farm workers. What it is to be a farm worker, it's not just about understanding law and understanding how to turn earth into food. You can't know it all. You know, some people know how to do administration, some people know how to turn earth into food, and it's sometimes it's a lot deeper than just understanding the law. It's understanding fear. It's understanding institutional racism and a history, a family lifelong history of being targeted. So it's not as simple as we don't understand law. It's this is a situation that I think is particularly beautiful, because it brings people together that for so long have stood on separate sides of the aisle. So for me, I think it's a special opportunity to collect interesting data and hopefully create better practices out of that. Thank you.
Buenas noches. Para mí, mi nombre es Eva, y para mí es muy importante lo que está pasando esta noche aquí, ¿verdad? Digo, porque yo he sido una trabajadora del campo, más de 40 años he trabajado ahí, y hablábamos a Calosha, y aquí hay personas que me conocen, ¿verdad? Hablábamos a Calosha para... Oh, perdón.
I'm sorry. Hello, I'm very glad about this discussion tonight. My name is Eva, and I've been working for 40 years. ¿Has estado trabajando 40 años en el campo?
Sí.
I've been working for 40 years.
Más de 40.
More than 40 years in the field.
Y saben que para mí es muy importante, porque por mucho tiempo, ¿verdad? Nosotros nos daba mucho miedo. A mí me daba mucho miedo reportar las cosas, ¿saben por qué? Porque nadie nos hacía caso.
I was very fearful to report things because, as in my case, nobody ever paid attention to us.
Nuestro comedor donde nosotros comíamos estaba junto de los baños.
Our dining room where we used to eat was next to the bathroom.
Se
and it was flooded. Se
tapaban los baños, se inundaba, y toda la suciedad estaba ahí cuando estábamos comiendo.
The bathrooms would get stopped up, and then they would flood into where we were eating.
Reportábamos a Calosha.
We would report it to Calosha.
Calosha hablaba a la compañía para que ellos iban a ir, y cuando hablaban ya todo estaba limpio.
And Calosha would call, and by the time they would get there, everything was already clean.
No había papel de baño.
There was no
había toallas para secarse las manos.
There were no towels to dry your hands.
¿Y qué pasaba? En un ratito decían después que éramos mentirosas.
What would happen is that the next thing out of their mouths was they were calling us liars.
Y las represalias eran muy malas con nosotros. Porque nos decía el patrón, ¿sabes qué? Dijo, para ti no hay trabajo.
What the owner would
nos
say
descansaban.
Was, there's no work for you.
Y si no había, también nos llevaban de un rancho a otro.
And they would take us from one ranch to another.
Y a veces también, ¿verdad? Cuando yo estuve trabajando en otro lugar,
And
¿verdad?
sometimes when I was working at another place,
Que había un cooler muy grande.
there was a very big cooler.
Y me tocó muchas veces estando enferma con
And a
calentura
lot of times when I was sick, had a fever,
y nos metían al cooler a dompear.
they would take us into the cooler to
A dompear, o sea, en las líneas, como pasan las líneas para las frutas y todo, las teníamos que vaciar.
to dump. They had to. I was thinking.
¿Y qué pasaba?
And what would
Decían
happen?
que no había represalias.
They would say that there's no retaliation.
Yo teniendo 6 hijos,
With
¿verdad?
my 6
Y
children,
tenía que aguantarme porque me
had
callaba
to
todo lo que
stand
pasaba ahí.
and
¿Por
be
qué
quiet
uno se aguanta?
about everything that
Porque
was
tenía que
happening.
darle de comer a mis
Why
hijos,
did you
¿verdad?
stand this? Because I had to feed my children.
Entonces, sí, yo pienso que es muy importante que que la gente, los rancheros le den a la gente seguridad y respeto. Y la gente no tenga miedo.
Security and respect, and that people are not afraid.
Porque uno se aguanta por el miedo, muchas cosas sobre asalto sexual, y se aguanta uno ¿por qué? Por miedo, por las represalias. Lo corren a uno y cuando lo corren a uno no tiene uno que darle de comer a los
And then
hijos.
you can't feed your children.
Y cuando lo corren a uno también,
And when
uno
you're all fired,
se deteriora como ser humano, lo hace que se devalore.
You devaluate it as a human being.
Y esas personas
And
no
those-
solamente son personas malas.
People are not
Se
only
puede
bad
llamar un
people.
asesino, son como asesinos
If
porque a la
if you could
persona
call them
la hacen
killers,
menos.
You could because they diminish people.
Y la realidad es que todos somos seres humanos.
And the reality is that we're all human beings.
Y dice, ¿verdad? Dios dice que no debes de hacer lo que no quieres que te hagan.
And God says you should not do unto others what you don't want done.
Bueno, tengo muchas cosas más que decir,
I have a
pero ya
lot
me
more
cortaron el
things to
tiempo.
say,
Buenas
but my
noches.
time ran out. Good evening.
Buenas noches. Mi nombre es Angélica Nevares.
Good evening. My name is Angelica Nevares.
Estoy muy preocupada por el idioma también.
I'm very worried about the language.
Quiero que no se olviden, por favor, este programa de
I
que
don't want you to forget
también el mensaje llegue en otros idiomas, como puede
about
ser
that
español,
program where the
mixteco o
message gets
zapoteco y
through
otros
Spanish,
idiomas
Mixteco,
los más que sean posibles.
Zapotec, or more languages, the more the better.
También es muy importante el horario de las oficinas que
It's also
van a tener o planear,
very important to see the
porque
schedule
las
of the
personas en los
offices,
campos
because the
trabajan
people
muchas horas.
in the field work
Y en un caso
long
que
hours.
quieran hacer un reporte, ¿a
And
qué
if
hora
they
lo van a
have
hacer?
to make a report, at what time are they going to go?
Mi proposición es que por favor planeen si pueden abrir un sábado cada mes
Proposal is that
para
maybe
aquellas
you could
personas que
open
quieran
one
ir
Saturday a
a
month
hacer algún reporte.
for people who might want to go make a report.
La otra cosa es que debería de haber como un fondo guardado para las personas que pierdan su trabajo por hacer un reporte, porque es por la razón por la que no hacen reportes, porque no quieren perder sus trabajos.
That might be a reason why they don't report, because they don't want to lose their jobs.
Hicimos unas encuestas, 500 encuestas con líderes campesinas y hubo muchas personas que no hicieron su reporte de acoso sexual por miedo a perder el trabajo.
We made 500 surveys with líderes campesinas, and there were a lot of people that didn't want to make that report, fill out that survey because of fear of reprisal.
Esto y les felicito y les deseo mucha suerte y
And that's
buenas
all.
noches.
I
Gracias.
congratulate you and I wish you a lot of luck. Good night.
Good evening, committee members. My name is Sean Prosky with Ventura County Collab. I want to thank you for the discussion we had today. It's been very enlightening, and I think it points to some important issues that we need to talk about as we look forward to the future of this program and what we want it to accomplish. I think it's important to keep in mind as we talk about what these goals are, as to what the limits are of what's facing this program, particularly the fact that we have a budget of $200,000 and that this particular program lacks any regulatory authority. So far, we've heard that committee members want a staff member who is not only knowledgeable about resources available to farm workers, but who can also be an effective mediator, and who is knowledgeable about labor laws, and who can also investigate workplace conditions. I think when we talk about practical limits on what we can accomplish through this program, we need to bear this in mind, that someone who meets all of those qualifications isn't going to be cheap to hire. And in addition, we also have another item on the agenda talking about an off-site office location. I think the committee is going to find that they're going to rapidly burn through that $200,000 in short order. So I think we need to really think practically about what we can, about outcomes and what we want to accomplish and what we can be readily accomplish through this program. I think the committee needs to start thinking very specifically about specific circumstances where they think this resource program can do some good. I think a couple of the folks here have mentioned sexual assault. It's worth bearing in mind that sexual assault is a crime. And if an employee comes anonymously to this program and says, hey, I have a supervisor who's committed a sexual assault or employee's committed sexual assault, what does the committee want the resource program staff member to do? Do they want them to go to the police? Do they want them to approach the employer? Do they want the employer to fire the employee who's been accused anonymously of this program? Like, what is the actual outcome from that process that we want? And that's an important question as to what type of work do we want this facilitator to be doing. And I think that, when we talk about a legitimate fear that a lot of employees have about retaliation, how do you have a mediation process through the employer about labor issues when the employer doesn't know the identity of the employee and the circumstances of the employee? How do you have that mediation process when everything's anonymous and they can't actually address the specifics of the complaint? I think that a lot of these questions need to be answered when we start thinking about the practical issues that we want this program to address and what we want the staff member to be doing on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Claudia Quesada y represento a la Organización de Líderes Campesinas.
Hello, my name is Claudia Quesada and I represent Líderes Campesinas.
Algunas compañeras ya han comentado algunos puntos muy importantes.
Some of the people here have mentioned very important points.
El objetivo de este programa es fantástico, es trabajar enfocado en los campesinos como muchas organizaciones, como muchas agencias trabajan, ¿verdad? Mi pregunta para ustedes es, ¿cuántos reportes tenemos de nuestros campesinos que están siendo abusados en este año? ¿Y por qué han sido tan pocos esos reportes, verdad? Mis recomendaciones representando a la organización es cómo vamos a trabajar para que nuestros campesinos tengan más confianza para reportarlo. Las organizaciones y agencias han existido por mucho tiempo, pero nuestros reportes no. El centro que se quiere abrir es fantástico, pero ¿cómo lo vamos a promover? ¿Hay un plan? Cada organización va a estar promoviendo esta oficina. ¿Hay un plan para esto? Esta pregunta es para ustedes. Líderes Campesinas presentó unos puntos muy importantes. Esperamos que lo puedan considerar. Entre otros sería, otro recurso sería tener una línea telefónica de emergencia. Si esa oficina va a estar abierta de 8 a 5, usualmente los horarios de oficina, y tenemos a una persona en crisis o está pasando un abuso en el campo, y, de 12 a 1 usualmente se toman los lunches. ¿Ustedes están considerando algo así de emergencia? Son algunas consideraciones que ojalá puedan ponerlo en su mesa. Ok, gracias.
So it's going to go from
Nancy,
to
no,
Spanish.
que viene Santiago Rivera.
My name is Santiago Rivera.
Kenya con en du nanya chikando y oficina nya minya centro nya osna. Shi kan na ta kan ji na ta gu nya medical ki kan shan ji na nya shen yong du na ka ta ta be na kon ka ka no.
Quiero que pongan la oficina en Oxnard.
I want you to put the office in Oxnard where Medi-Cal is, because that's where people go.
Kenya ta gu ta yo oi ne la nya 100 grados na ka nya isa ja ta tung mi pa tong ra ko ke sha ra pen ta nya ni shi nya ji bi ta tung ko na ka nya kya bi nya wa ra nya ta tung yin da ji ko nya wa nya ta shi ba ra nya na ni je wa na sa.
A veces hay grados, llega a 100 grados el calor, pero el patrón no le importa, lo que le importa al patrón es sacar su producto
And the employer doesn't care. He wants to get this product out.
y ni sombra pone.
And he doesn't even provide shade.
Se ta ko ni du na nya ta shi na zui ba ko du sa ja ta tung ko zui ya ba ta shi na ta tung ra wo ba ta shi ra nya ta tung shen yong du zui ba ko du shi ta tung ki chung ma du sa ja shen yong du da ji ba na ko da ji ba.
Necesitamos también que nos den agua buena para tomar
We also
porque
need good water to drink
la que nos dan sabe muy feo
because the water we have tastes horrible.
y también queremos sombra.
And we also want shade.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Alright, looks like that's it. Unless any last minute, I think we can close public comment. All right, thank you, everyone. Really, really appreciate all of those really, really thoughtful public comments, and thanks for being here late at night and coming out. I don't know if we have any, before we kind of move on, anyone from the committee have any thoughts on the public comments today?
I just wanted to clarify that the way I understood it was a worker would confront or have a conversation with the employer if they gave permission. The idea isn't to force them into a conversation with an employer where they have fear of retaliation. So that if anyone here disagrees, let me know, because I think that's the only way that would function.
Yeah, I think that, to your point, mediation or a sit-down discussion about what the issue is with both the employer or employer's representative and the employee waging the complaint is one of the options that could be used. The other option is just to go in and talk about what the issue is, and I just want to let you know, right? And then that person that is working this program could decide how they want to handle it at that point. Right? Again, it's hard to make steadfast rules in any of this because there's so many different issues that can take place, and good judgment is going to be the first criteria by which we select this person or people.
And I think we would not even talk to the employer without the worker's permission. We would be saying, if you want to resolve this, it'll work better if you talk directly, or we can at least tell the employer that this issue exists, but it would be the worker's choice.
So it's laying out those different options and asking the worker which do they want to go down. Do they want to go down the anonymous, route? Do they want to go down the take legal action? Do they want to go down the direct resolution and mediation route? Based on what that advice and the pros and cons of each. Yeah. I definitely heard some important things today that I think inform some of the other conversations we've been having about where to locate the office, and I definitely heard a couple of people say in Oxnard, particularly the location that we talked about at a previous meeting where Medi-Cal and that and SNAP and all that stuff is located at that central Oxnard office. Around the hours, I heard a lot around and kind of how can we make sure it's accessible hours, maybe a weekend weekend time or I thought it was interesting. Somebody mentioned bringing sometimes those mediations. There might be a committee of workers or a group of workers who might want to participate, not kind of one worker going alone. That might be something to think through. And definitely coming back to some of the things we've talked about before about language access, and then over and over again. Of course, I think the biggest theme that I heard from comments is around retaliation. And I think we as a group really need to be serious about figuring out how are we going to do the best we can to make sure that this program is really preventing any retaliation that's coming as a result of conversations that come out of it.
Another takeoff on this, not so much from the conflict resolution point of view, but more, how do we invite companies to be involved with this? One of the things I've thought about in terms of a missing piece to what I think we need in the county to help facilitate connecting employers with employees is some knowledge on how, assumingly there are many times a year where there are more jobs than there are people to fill those jobs. That's not always the case, but there's certainly periods of time during the year where that's the issue. What if we had some forum, I don't know how you do it, but some forum where employers could learn about the way potential employees feel about what does good look like in an employer? What types of things am I looking for in an employer in terms of practices and procedures? And somebody brought up the point that this is about feeling, and it's about judgment, and it's about understanding fear, and it's about understanding that it's not always about the law, and I agree with that. But that only comes from discussion and talking about experience and what people have seen work well, and how they decide to go to work for a certain company versus someone else when they have a lot of choices. And so that may be a way that we can utilize this program to create value for the employee, but also the employer in terms of some outreach. And I don't know if anybody who's doing that specifically. That may be an unmet need at this point.
I think one of the things we're going to have to make a decision about at some point is, are we going to focus countywide, or are we going to really look at Oxnard and in particular indigenous workers? Because maybe we need to start out with a more precise focus and then enlarge. Given the comment that was very apropos about how far $200,000 will go. Are we ready to talk about location?
I just wanted to add one more comment that I heard that I think was we should take into consideration about this person also serving as a conduit to the agencies to help them improve their services. Because if there's that responsibility to provide that service, how can this person help, whether it's provide the information or just be able to help those agencies improve their services so that it doesn't all fall into this program.
Any other comments on the public comment here tonight, or we'll move into the agenda item around discuss possible? So we at a previous meeting discussed. Okay.
Are you going to go on to the next item?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So on this last one, in consideration of kind of our larger timeline, right? And I think it was very helpful to hear everybody's comments tonight, because I think it helps all of us understand some sort of parameters and concerns, and we can use that to help shape what we are going to propose, which we have to propose something. So I am feeling really conflicted about suggesting that a smaller committee of us start to actually drill down and start laying something out that we could then work off of. I think we're at that point, at least.
I think we better, or we're not going
Right,
to.
I agree with you. But I also feel conflicted because I can't volunteer to do that right now until like mid-December. But if there is anybody that can start, I happily will join as soon as I can. But I think that we do need to start thinking about a subcommittee that's going to start working on something. So that.
I have a question. County Council would want to form a subcommittee, is that possible? Or would that require board approval?
No, I think that they. I think it's the authority you've been given is broad enough that it could encompass subcommittees.
Does it have to be a certain number of people?
It should. That's a good question. With the Brown Act, it should be less than a quorum. So quorum, I think, for this would be 5. So it'd probably be 4 or less.
Do we want to talk about who might be interested in being on a subcommittee? Are folks interested in starting a subcommittee to kind of drill down on maybe a little more detailed proposal to bring back to this group and have something to work off of?
When is our next meeting?
The next meeting currently is tentatively scheduled for December 14th at 1 p.m. And that was based on all 8 members' availability, so we should then depend also on your other meetings between the subcommittee members. I'd be interested in spending a limited amount of time between now and then working on with others on this.
I volunteer as well.
I'd like to be on it, but also if either of you want to, I know
I'm not
we're now at 4, so.
More until December.
Who's going to be on it? Who's going to be on it exactly?
So then-
Remember Brokaw, Ospina, Barajas?
And then if Huvnad's on it, then I shouldn't be on it because we need to be 4 or less, right?
Okay.
So 1, 2, 3, 4. Sounds good.
Perfect.
And should we have a space on our next meeting's agenda for you to bring, not the whole program back, but something for us to consider?
It's not much time.
No, it's not. Maybe it's one piece of it, or I don't know, whatever you guys decide.
Well, we could use agenda as a report by
Back
the
from that
subcommittee
committee. Yeah, that's what I
regarding
think.
the discussion. Tell me again who's on the subcommittee. You said Natalia and Fugana.
All right.
Thank you for volunteering, so I didn't have to.
Yeah.
Are we moving on to location?
Let's do it. So at the previous meeting, we talked about some locations within the county government where this could be housed, and our directive from the board was that it could be, but not necessarily in or not exclusively in housing in county government. So it'd be great to kind of brainstorm some ideas of what, if it wasn't in county government, where could be.
So I'd like to report that quite by chance, I got connected with, what is her name? Cinder Sinclair, who is the Executive Director of Community Action Ventura County. And I wasn't planning to talk to her about this, but when she started telling me about community action, I realized that this might be a possible place. And I'm very interested in looking at alternatives outside of the county facility, just because of the kind of flexibility I think we need to be open on Saturday and evenings, and to be really accessible. So Community Action is located on Richmond Avenue, 5th and Richmond. And I went and visited them, and they have a very nice reception area with a very welcoming receptionist. They have plenty of space for a private office. They are willing to be accessible evenings and Saturdays. What we're doing fits well with their mission, and they provide a lot of other services. So I think it's one possibility that we ought to look at, and somebody else from the committee might want to go talk and Dr. Sinclair says she'll be happy to come talk to us also if we want her to.
Do you know if this would be a space we would pay to rent or that they would donate to?
You know, I didn't discuss that. It would be, they were quite happy with the idea of a grant from the county to them for a contract position, but I didn't get into the details. There was I met with 4 of them actually, and they were very interested and very excited about what we're doing. So that was kind of a nice first connection.
So Ellen, is that just a space, like to be housed there, or is that, we had talked previously about maybe that it wouldn't be a county employee, but it would be contracted through to another agency that would then take on this program?
Right.
It's a space and the contracting out of it? Okay.
And with that, there would be a process, if it does go to an outside organization, that would have to take place in order for the funds to be transferred to that organization, if it's board approved, whatever is recommended. But what I would say, we would like some information, and if they're willing to come and speak to the committee, I think it might be better to invite them to give us a presentation similar to how we had from Human Services and from HR, just to give some information and an opportunity for questions and answers also. Do you think that would be something that they would be open to do?
Sure. Yes, she said she would. They're also right by a bus line. They're very accessible. What I don't know is how many farm workers are already coming there for some of the services they provide.
If we invite her to speak, we can ask her to
Exactly. That's a good
tailor her
opportunity.
information towards that.
So that's one possibility. I'm sure there must be others.
Any thoughts or ideas?
Yeah, I'm still thinking of the HSA, 1400 Vanguard Drive in Oxnard. Is the place that all people that I know already know that place. I think it's gonna be great if we have a contractor. If someone from that contractor can be to that location, gonna be really helpful for the community.
So it could be even at the HSA location, but contracted to a nonprofit.
Yeah.
But you're saying that. I mean, and we did hear that from one of the commenters.
What I think is a benefit in locating it at the county HSA is that it can be scaled to eventually scale to their other locations, even if it's just portions of it, so that we can have access throughout the county. That's a benefit. And then if we're going to consider other agencies or organizations, I wonder if we would have to open up a process like an RFP.
Do you know?
I don't know. I know it would take more time, but
Everyone looks to the lawyer.
And to contract out, whether you can contract out depends on, just roughly speaking, whether the position is duplicative of what the county already has. The county has mechanics. The county can, if they need more mechanic work, can go out and contract for more mechanics. Generally, we have to hire another county mechanic. It sounds to me that this position that's being contemplated would be pretty unique, and we're going to have these contracting out issues, but we'd have to examine that. So that's whether you can do it. How to do it, any contract would have to be approved by the Board of Supervisors. There are very narrow circumstances in which it's required that the county competitively bid a contract. I don't think this would fall under any of those circumstances. It would be up to the Board of Supervisors to choose, though, whether they want to competitively bid it. They could directly contract with an outside firm, or they could choose to send it out for an RFP, which is a request for proposal. Sorry to use the government lawyer lingo. Yeah.
I was going to be, but I definitely hear what. So even as Ellen mentioned.
Oh, sorry.
as Ellen mentioned, there may be the greatest need or the biggest initial need maybe in Oxnard, and particularly with the Mixteco community. But I would hate to see at least kind of a long-term kind of shackling us to not be able to really serve the Santa Clara Valley, right? And I think what Gisela is saying is right of the kind of the value of at least HSA has locations in Santa Clara Valley that'd be very easy for kind of a staff member to kind of go out there and do a day there at their Santa Paula office.
Be appropriate. We just have office hours certain days of the week in this location and certain days in the week in the Oxnard location, so they're accessible to the whole farm worker community.
And I think if we're want to seriously consider the Medi-Cal building, I really think we need to go and look at potential space that would be in that building, because that's my concern, that there's no there's not a good space to have that kind of communication in a way that's private, confidential. I haven't been there, but just from what I've heard from the advocates in my building, the way they function is just different from maybe how we're envisioning this program. So I just want to make sure we go out there and take a look at it and make sure it can meet the needs of what we want it to.
And you're figuring out a good place for the kind of initial kind of consultation with the farm worker, or a good place for the mediation, or both?
Both. Yeah, I haven't been there myself, so I can't speak to that.
Maybe a couple people can go and see it.
Great.
So another committee can be formed to look at the location. Or do we all go as a group? Because then it becomes a meeting, right?
We offered at the last meeting that we could do tours of the Vanguard location and of the America's Job Center. Yes.
It's not a violation of the Brown Act. No, we can't. We're not supposed to all get together as a
No,
group.
we would notice it. We would do the proper notification.
Okay,
So
okay.
that would be no problem. It would
Okay.
just be your availability. I personally think it would be more of a benefit to have as many committee members visit the locations and get a visual and also ask questions. I would say.
I think we should do that sooner than later and have, just schedule something, preferably on the same day where we have this meeting, or at some point, right? But
or before, because if we're going to hear from the community action group, then it would be helpful to have seen the other location.
And
right?
we do have a meeting, so we have a meeting December 14th, but then also we have another one January 10th, 2018. And then we're supposed to report back to the Board of Supervisors, and their last meeting before January 30th, and their last meeting is January 23rd. Seeing that we are moving along and there is progress in this information, I mean, there's always, again, the option of maybe asking for a little bit more time to make sure we do have all the information, and especially the committee, you have the ability to really make your recommendations as accurate and well-informed as possible to the board.
We have 2 more meetings planned prior to our deadline.
Correct. And then, again, that's the deadline.
So we got a subcommittee.
We can report progress.
Yeah.
Right. Like you said, and we could also possibly, again, since we are moving forward, if it's another option, we can maybe ask for a little bit of more time to gather all that information.
I think, I'm sorry. I think it'll be before we go look at places, it might be helpful to, for us to be able to drill down a little more on just the thing that Dave talked about last time, what a day in the life of the staff person is going to look like. Because I think they're going to be out away from an office most of the time, which influences what we need, the space. So maybe we should do that piece. And then maybe we will have collected more places to go visit and do it all in one time, but not before the next meeting.
Is that a good thing for the subcommittee, or is that a good thing for our next meeting? What do you think for that kind of day in the life discussion?
Maybe a different subcommittee.
Well, I think it fits right in with what your subcommittee is going to do, right? Which is create what that would look like. I think.
I don't think I'm on the
This conversation.
You're on the subcommittee, right? Did you?
No, I think.
Oh, you took yourself.
Yeah, because I wanted not to.
I think this conversation today, though, about what the process is going to look like, ties into the day in the life, and I think it's something that we all have to continue. I was hoping that the subcommittee would maybe move it along a little furder on putting together what they think the consensus points were from the public comment as well as what we discussed here as a group, and then maybe pose some directed questions to us in regards to the next couple pieces, so we can have that guided conversation at the next meeting and maybe move it along a little bit more. But I'm in favor of doing more of that before looking at spaces, or even if we consider like an RFP, then it's kind of like, what are we describing if it's going to be contracted out, and then we have to do I don't know what that looks like. So I would like us to make some more headway on the program.
I tend to be an optimistic person, but I think it's possible that we may be actually closer than we think on a lot of this stuff. I mean, it did seem like there wasn't a ton of disagreement actually in terms of the almost flow chart of the process of conflict resolution. I think we're almost there, and I think the subcommittee could kind of nail that down, fairly quickly based on our conversation. I think the day in the life is largely like that, plus all their outreach activities, right? And the outreach and education they're doing and meeting with, growers and farm workers and organizations. I mean, that to me seems like pretty much their day in life, right? And the outreach activities probably takes most of that time, and the dealing with the conflict resolution is probably smaller. And then the location, I think we still want to hear from community action. I think we want to, check out the sites ourselves. But it seems like we might be close there. I mean, it seems like a lot of folks are leaning towards that HSA location in Oxnard. But if community action is way better, or if that location doesn't have the right meeting space, we could change that. But that seems like where the committee might be leaning at this point. So my thought is we actually are maybe closer than we think, and a subcommittee can kind of nail down those last bits. I'm always an optimist.
But I think it doesn't. I think the space might be easier to. Once we see the space, we can kind of decide. I think it can be something that comes after. So I wouldn't mind maybe putting that off to January. I just think the meteor stuff. Like, how are we going to go and know what we're even looking at if we don't know what kind of conference spaces?
That's right.
So I think.
But it does need to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
And it seems like the kind of job description-y stuff is also what the county needs first in terms of preparing.
If it stays within the county, correct, we would need to really finalize. That would be a whole other step that your committee would have to decide is the job requirements for the staff members or member.
That's another thing we can consider, 2 staff people, a man and a woman. That's true. It would overcome some of the issues.
And I agree, as we go through this, speaker from CoLab made the point, it's easy to sit here and brainstorm and come up with a lot of great ideas in a lot of places where there's missing pieces to what we're trying to accomplish. And more than likely what's going to happen is we're going to come up with 20 things, and we're going to have to pare that down to 5 of the most important things, because the money is going to get burned up fast. Time is never as abundant as anybody thinks it is, and we just need to keep that in mind as we move forward, right? That's one piece. And the other piece is, I think we should always keep in mind how we envision measuring success, because that's hard to articulate. And I think, at least from my perspective, I advocated strongly for this program since its inception, but if it's not creating value, I'll also be the one to advocate for it not to be here anymore, right? And so I think we need to go into it thinking about how we're going to measure things, even if it's a little bit subjective.
I have a question. Who's going to have the final selection on this individual that has all these attributes? And is really the key to this program.
At our last meeting, we had.
Okay. So we can't respond to that.
I would wait until you're done.
Cool. So we do have a general public comment.
Agenda item, and then
we'll just really quickly. All right. Well, do we have any other committee member comments?
I want to say thank you to the people who participated today and attended, and to the extent that you can participate some more and offer feedback on what we are specifically considering here, that will be very helpful to us. And we definitely want to continue to be educated about your experiences in all areas of the industry. But I think that I value and I believe that there are very smart people in all facets of the industry who can offer some good suggestions on the specifics of what this program would look like that would be valuable to you. So I just hope that people continue to the extent they can to participate and provide that feedback to us.
Yeah, ditto to that, 100%. All right. Well, if there are no other committee member comments, do we need any guidance for kind of next meeting's agenda? Or
We would if you would like the specific, and there's a discussion on future agenda items, and if there's the two specific areas or something that you would like to have a discussion at your December 14th meeting. There was the report back for the subcommittee, which would be one. And then there was also the discussion of the need for the day in the life discussion or the presentation from community action. I mean, you seem to have pretty good lengthy conversations. I think maybe having two, I don't know if we could squeeze in three unless we increase the meeting time.
The day in the life is part of the report back.
Oh, okay. That'll be part of the subcommittee? Oh, okay.
So the subcommittee will be kind of drafting a day in the life, right? And then that will be reported in. And then what else is the subcommittee going to be reporting back on? Day in the life. Is that it? Is it?
Well, I thought that it
is
was
it this flow chart kind of
going
thing?
to be more of trying to lay out kind of what we've synthesized and lay out what
we've talked about so far.
What the program may start to look like based on like our discussion and the comment and areas that seem like consensus points, but then also those areas that we didn't really decide, we didn't really make a decision on this, and so let's focus our conversation next meeting on trying to decide on one of those areas or two of those areas that are crucial for the program. So for me, it's just a continuation of this topic, right?
Yeah. But start to drill down and come up with a recommendation.
Yeah, that would be
right.
good.
Move from the brainstorming phase to the decision phase.
There you go.
So do you continue discussing the Farmworker research program goals and the conflict resolution process? Is that?
I don't think the goals necessarily.
Yeah, I think we need to discuss those.
I think we've kind of covered that.
But so conflict resolution process, kind of what is the day-to-day work going to look like of the person,
Duties and
then
responsibilities as a staff member.
Yeah, right. That's right. Duties and
discuss duties and responsibilities.
And then I think, as Natalia mentioned earlier, I think it might be okay to hold off the discussion on where it's housed until the January meeting, because that may flow from the more discussion of the duties and responsibilities and the kind of structure and process of the program. So, I don't know if it's okay to hold off the presentation from community action till the January, and maybe one piece that it's a short question but a very important question that we haven't answered yet is it one person or two people, right? And that might be good to discuss at that next meeting if we have time.
With duties and responsibilities, obviously we need to discuss qualifications, and we also need to discuss the hiring process, and public comment may go to that, but I'd like to know that as well. Are we involved in it and whatnot? But duties, responsibilities, and qualifications, I think we need to really pin that down. That's the meat and potatoes of the whole thing.
I think part of the qualifications will flow out of the work of the subcommittee. It'll be clear. But maybe then at the next meeting we can really drill down on, or have another subcommittee that works on the job description more, as we get more and more specific.
So the subcommittee is coming back to us with kind of the day in the life, this kind of like flowcharty process for conflict resolution, and the duties, responsibilities, and qualifications. That's kind of what we're reporting back on, and that'll make up the bulk of the next meeting.
So you don't want to hear from community action?
I think we want to hear from them at the January.
So you don't want to go visit any sites until after the January meeting?
Right, you have January, someone coming.
We could visit sites before. I mean, maybe it doesn't make sense to visit them before hearing from them, but I don't know. What do folks think?
You wouldn't have to hear from her. You could go, if we set up the site visit, you could go visit.
And we have those for January.
I mean, I think we try to get as much accomplished in as quick a time as possible. And if we need to extend, if we need to go ask for more time, then that's what we have to do. I'd rather get it right than try to rush things.
Either the January meeting or ideally the January meeting or at least the next one, I think we need to have another evening meeting because it is so valuable to get this kind of feedback and input, and we're not going to get it for a day meeting.
When originally I set up the scheduling, I did include some evening times, and it wasn't, I think we only reached at 4 board members or 5 members that were available for 8 meetings for those meeting dates. We could try to revisit your availability for both either the December or January meetings, or also look if it's continued, if we were able to extend to have more meetings, maybe the next meetings in the evening.
Were there date times available? The same time?
They were days.
Yeah,
I sent out like 4 or 5. I sent out like 4 or 5 times, like some in the morning, afternoon,
Yeah,
and then the evening.
I think after tonight, we all agree that this was invaluable to have this group here available to.
So I could send out another.
It's also really valuable to have all of us here too.
Yeah.
Would maybe send out the same dates that we agreed to at different time
I'll send the same
slots
times
and see if that works. Yeah.
Would people potentially be open to maybe a second January meeting, possibly, knowing we're kind of running up against deadline, have a lot of work to do, and that second January meeting maybe being an evening?
I think it's necessary.
Yeah, I think it seems to me like we're going to need an extra meeting because what I think is like we are in the beginning, and we only had 2 more meetings, and I think we're going to need extension. Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll send out by the end of the week. Again, is that program? Doodle. Another doodle. That's it. With some evening times again and meeting dates, and then that way the majority we could then schedule that. And then I'll include a second January meeting date.
But for now, could you restate the date and time of the following meetings as well as the board of
Sure.
supervisors?
Tentatively, we have scheduled the next Farmworker Research Program Advisory Committee meeting for December 14th at 1 p.m. and in January 10th of 2018 at 10 a.m. All with the goal in trying to meet before the January 30th deadline in which the board requested we report back with recommendations, and their last meeting date is actually January 23rd. So we would have to report back to them either with recommendations or requests for some more time on that January 23rd date.
Any other committee member comments before we move to public comment and then close out?
Should we have a formal mission statement for this program, or do we already?
I mean, we've got the board guidance here that
What I mean is
we're working on.
I don't know.
To me, that's okay, but what do other folks think?
It was just.
I don't know if it'd be worth like
It'd be
the
too much.
words and
Yeah, okay.
I think our goals are
All right.
It's something we could note, considering you never know if this committee continues after
Sure.
we have the discussion of having an oversight to the program itself. Then we could have make sure that we visit that and develop a mission statement.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Well, then why don't we go into public comment?
Yeah. I had a question. I don't know if it's directed to Mike Powers, representative of county council, but obviously the key to this program is the individual you select to do all of the goals that you set out. So my question is, where's the rubber meet the road? Who is ultimately responsible for selection of this person, monitoring to see if they're doing their job consistent with the standards in an unbiased, objective way? And if any action needs to be taken, who will be responsible for that?
From what we currently have and what this committee has been formed is to bring to the Board of Supervisors recommendations for their approval. So at this stage, what we're just doing is gathering those recommendations and have the board either say yes or no. And then again, similar to what we were discussing, I just mentioned, if this program somehow continues and there is going to be some oversight, if this is the committee that will continue to do so and report back to the board. And with that, we were also mentioning how will we measure the success of the program with that data and that information. So as I think this committee develops and makes those decisions on the recommendations, then we will have a little bit more clarification as to where this will go in the future and how we will be able to report that back to the board.
Does the fact that it could be an independent contractor make your job more difficult as opposed to somebody within the county system?
If it's with the contractor, make my
Yes.
job as in the CEO representative?
No, yes, I'm talking about if we were to go to an outside independent contractor to perform this work, is it in terms of oversight by the board or whoever is authorized to
Right.
oversee that person?
That would then, at that point, they would have to report back to the board themselves directly. It would have to be decided ultimately at the end by the board who they would want. Again, would it still be going to be this committee, or would that organization report directly to the board with information that the board would like reported back to them in order for them to make the decision if the program could continue and they continue to fund it within that organization?
And oftentimes the board, if they choose to contract out, will house the contract within a certain agency for oversight. And so maybe the CEO's office, maybe Rosa, you'd be lucky. But that's
only through my county council.
but that's, if it's outside, that's kind of the model. The board will choose an agency to administer it, oversee it. If it's in-house, the board will direct the county HR director to create a position. Then they'll go through the county hiring process. The board will decide which county agency the position will be housed in. That agency then will have the responsibility for managing that employee.
If in that latter circumstance, who would have the ultimate discretion to hire that person?
It would probably be the particular agency to which it's, the position is assigned.
For an informative point for everybody, our last meeting, it was November 3rd. November
Yes, November 3rd.
3rd. We had a presentation from the Human Resources agency or department of the County of Ventura about precisely these questions and our different options. So I'm only mentioning it because I think there's video available online.
Right. It is
So
available.
there was somebody there that did do a presentation about what that means, whether they'd be under a collective bargaining agreement or not, how the job needs to be announced, and what level they fall under. I forgot the terminology right now, but whether they were like an exempt or not exempt or
Right.
that other category.
Right, under which bargaining unit.
Right. So if you want to go watch the video, anybody, they're available online, and there is more information.
I know where to find it.
My understanding is, Rob, that this committee will be taking a recommendation to the board about how we think this should happen, where that authority should be, and so forth. And then the board can say okay or not.
Yes, thanks.
All right. Any other general public comments on items on the agenda?
I just want to mention something. When I came up here to say a comment that I said that I don't trust the program, I did it, I mean, probably that's the way I see it, that it's probably like the process. That doesn't mean that I don't trust you. I see a lot of feedback, the comments from all of you guys. And that's what I think, that I trust you, that you guys are doing the best for the farm workers, and make sure that that is going down to the people that is going to be in charge of this program. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, if there are no other comments from the public, then I'll entertain. Oh.
Hi. The mic is off. It's fine. I'll scream. It's fine. So my name is Daniela Hernandez. I'm an intern with Líderes Campesinas, and I think it's thank you all for having these conversations and having a space for us to be able to voice our concerns. And going off of that, I would like to say something which we're on the topic of sexual assault. And as I was walking here, because it's so dark in the parking lot, two men came up to me in a car and stopped, pulled the car up, got out of the car, and I had to run over here to escape them. So I think it would be very beneficial if there was more lighting, in the parking, or move this meeting elsewhere where there would be better lighting. Sorry, I'm still a little shaken up. But just since we're already talking about doing these kind of changes, I would really appreciate that. This was my first time here, and I wanted to be here to learn and be exposed to this environment. But unfortunately, that happened to me right now, and I wasn't even able to concentrate that much during the meeting and pay attention. But I just wanted to voice that before I left tonight. And for los que no tienen audífonos también, nada más lo que estoy diciendo, que mi nombre es Daniela, soy una interna con Líderes Campesinas. Hoy es mi primera vez estar en esta junta y estamos hablando del acoso sexual, y cuando estaba viniendo yo en camino acá no encontraba la oficina, estaba muy oscuro en el estacionamiento. Y dos hombres pararon en una camioneta cuando estaba caminando yo para acá y tuve que empezar a correr para llegar aquí adentro. Y perdón, estoy muy emocionada porque apenas recientemente ahorita me pasó. Pero no quería irme hoy sin decir esto a todos porque estamos hablando de hacer cambios y yo pienso que deberíamos de hacer cambios aquí, como en el estacionamiento debería de haber más luz. Está demasiado oscuro afuera ahorita. Entiendo que es el cambio de tiempo, pero hay que hacer esfuerzos. I think we need to make an effort to make different changes even here in the parking lots, which is where we're having these meetings, but I just didn't want to leave without voicing that, so thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, and yeah, and I hope got some county staff there, and I hope that's
Perdón,
being
yo también
conveyed.
quería decir algo, ¿verdad?
I
Yo
would
digo
also like to say something.
que es muy importante, ¿verdad? Que nosotros le demos a nuestras campesinas
Very important that
la seguridad
we
de
have
no
the government,
represalias.
farm workers,
Si nosotros nos damos
security
cuenta
and not
cuántas
retaliation.
personas no reportan por miedo,
If
por
you-
temor,
if we-
¿verdad?
we'd like to
Si
know how many
ustedes,
people don't
como
report
acaban
because
de
of
decir,
fear.
¿verdad? Ustedes estamos, los que estamos todos aquí
The
estamos
ones that are
preocupados
here,
por
we're
eso.
worried about this.
¿Verdad? Lo que a mí me pasa, no quiero que le
happens
pase
to me,
a otra persona.
I don't want it to happen
¿Verdad?
to someone
Nosotros,
else.
a mí me gusta, ¿verdad? Yo vengo también de Líderes Campesinas.
I come also from
A mí
Líderes
me gusta
Campesinas.
este trabajo, ayudar a la gente que realmente lo necesita.
We'd
Yo
like
cuando
to
ando
do this work
hablándole
to
a la
help the
gente
people
de afuera, ¿verdad? A las campesinas, a nuestra
like to
comunidad, les doy
speak to the
seguridad.
people
Que
from
crean en la
outside
ley,
of us,
porque hay
believe
ley
and
que
that
nos
they
tienen que
believe in the
ayudar.
law.
Como antes yo no las conocía,
Before I
pero
didn't know
yo quisiera que
what the
ustedes
laws were,
buscaran
but
un punto,
I would like
¿verdad?
for you
Para
guys
que
to
donde la gente tuviera confianza del
to
campo
work on something
y decir
so that
lo que les
people
está
have,
pasando.
Trust the system.
¿Verdad? Y no tener
They
miedo
can be able to
a las
say what's happening
represalias,
to them and not be
tener
afraid
que los
of
rancheros puedan darle
retaliation.
seguridad a sus
That
trabajadores.
ranchers can provide security for their workers.
Gracias.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you everyone for sharing those.
Before you go, just the safety
Yeah,
issue here.
yeah.
If anyone feels uncomfortable, there's a security kiosk downstairs on the main plaza. You can go and ask them to escort you to your car. And I'll even do it too. People are terrified of lawyers. So, if somebody feels uncomfortable.
Yes.
Thank you. And I
We
saw
have
some
security
county staff
coming.
talking. Great. All right. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
Second. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.